A poor girl makes a wish to Santa Claus. But when a millionaire reads her letter, he starts to cry. The biting December wind whistled through the cracks of the small apartment where Lily Evans lived. At 10 years old, she already knew the cold well, not just the kind that froze her hands and bare feet, but the kind that gripped her chest whenever she heard her mother cough in the next room. While Christmas lights twinkled on the streets of Hollybrook, filling the town with color and smiles, Lily felt only the weight of silence in her dark home. There was no laughter there, only the occasional sound of her mother's cough and the scratching of the pencil in her trembling hand. "Dear Santa," Lily began to write, her uneven handwriting dancing in the candlelight. She paused, biting her lip, the words struggling to come out. How could she explain to Santa that this year she didn't want toys or candy, or even a new pair of shoes to replace the ones with holes in them? A stronger coughing fit echoed through the small, cold apartment. Lily looked at the closed door of her mother's room, her heart clenching. Mary Evans, once the most vibrant and cheerful woman in Hollybrook, now could barely get out of bed. The illness consuming her was an invisible monster, stealing not only her health but also her smiles, her warm hugs, and, more recently, her ability to work. Lily returned her attention to the letter, determination shining in her young eyes. "Santa," she continued, "I know you must be very busy making toys for all the children in the world, but this year I need to ask for something different." As she wrote, Lily remembered the days when her mother would take her for walks in the park, when they laughed together making apple pies in the small kitchen, now silent and cold. She remembered Mary's radiant smile, now rarely seen, hidden beneath layers of worry and pain. "My mum is very sick," the pen scratched the paper with growing urgency, "and we don't have money for the medicine she needs. The doctors say she can get better, but we need help." Lily stopped, wiping a stubborn tear with the frayed sleeve of her sweater. She looked around the dark apartment, noticing the empty spaces where furniture once stood, sold to pay hospital bills, the nearly empty refrigerator, the silence of the television that no longer worked, the cold seeping through the poorly sealed windows. All of it weighed heavily on her small shoulders. I know I'm not the only child in the world with problems," Lily continued, her resolve growing with each word. "But if you can, Santa, please bring a miracle for my mum. I don't need presents this year. I just want her to get well." As she finished the letter, Lily heard a creak from the bedroom. Quickly, she folded the paper and hid it under her pillow. The door opened slowly, revealing Mary, pale and fragile, leaning against the doorframe. "Lily, honey, what are you doing awake so late?" Mary's voice was just a hoarse whisper. Lily rushed to help her mother, gently guiding her back to bed. "I was just thinking about Christmas, Mom." "Don't worry, go back to sleep." After settling Mary in, Lily quietly returned to her mattress on the living room floor. She picked up the letter, now slightly crumpled, and held it against her chest. Tomorrow, she decided, she would put it in the special mailbox that the town hall had installed for letters to Santa Claus. As she lay down, Lily looked out the window at the starry sky. A particularly bright star twinkled, as if in response to her unspoken hopes. "Please," she whispered to the night, "may someone hear my letter." The next morning, with the first rays of sun barely touching the rooftops of Hollybrook, Lily slipped out of the house. The cold air nipped at her cheeks as she ran through the empty streets, the precious letter clutched in her hand. In front of the red and gold mailbox, decorated with bells and ribbons, Lily hesitated. What if Santa couldn't help? What if her letter got lost among thousands of others? Closing her eyes and taking a deep breath, she slid the envelope through the slot. The sound of the letter falling into the box echoed like a bell of hope. Lily stood there for a moment, her small hands pressed against the cold metal, as if in silent prayer. As she walked back home, to another day of battling cold and hunger, of caring for her mother and waiting for a miracle, Lily couldn't imagine that her simple letter was about to cross oceans and change not only her life, but the lives of many others. What Lily didn't know was that thousands of miles away in a gleaming New York skyscraper, a man named John Thompson was about to make a decision that would intertwine his destiny with hers in ways neither of them could foresee. The morning sun barely penetrated the mirrored windows of the penthouse on the 78th floor of one of Manhattan's most imposing skyscrapers. Inside, John Thompson, 55, watched the city that never sleeps slowly awaken. His reflection in the glass showed a man of elegant bearing, perfectly trimmed grey hair and piercing blue eyes, yet empty of emotion. John adjusted his silk tie, an automatic gesture after decades in the corporate world. His closet, larger than many New York apartments, was filled with tailored suits and watches that cost more than luxury cars. Yet, on that December morning, all that luxury seemed strangely meaningless. As he prepared for another day at the office, flashbacks of his childhood flooded his mind. Christmas, 1973. Little Johnny, only 8 years old, shivered as he entered the freezing kitchen of their small Bronx apartment. His mother, Sarah, was hunched over the sink, coughing violently. "Mom, are you okay?" Johnny asked, his voice trembling with concern. Sarah turned, forcing a tired smile. "I'm fine, honey. Just a cold." Johnny knew it was more than that. For weeks his mother had barely been able to work, and the bills piled up on the kitchen table, stamped with red, final notice warnings. "Maybe Santa will bring the medicine you need," Johnny suggested hopefully. Sarah's smile faltered for a moment. "Maybe, my love. Now go get ready for school." Johnny obeyed, but not before noticing the tears in his mother's eyes. Present John shook his head, pushing away the painful memories. That Christmas, so many years ago, was the last he spent with his mother. Sarah succumbed to pneumonia a few months later, leaving Johnny in the care of the foster care system. The following years were a constant struggle. Orphanages, temporary foster families, part-time jobs while trying to stay in school. But John was resilient and determined. He promised himself he would never again be powerless in the face of adversity. With scholarships and hard work, John managed to get into a prestigious university. His talent for business soon stood out, and by 30 he was already a respected name on Wall Street. At 40 he founded his own company, Thompson Enterprises, which quickly became a giant in technology and clean energy. Now, at 55, John Thompson was one of the richest and most powerful men in the world. But success had come at a price. 3 failed marriages, no children, and a lingering sense of emptiness that no million-dollar acquisition could fill. The private elevator took him directly to his office on the top floor of the Thompson building. His assistant, Jessica, was already waiting for him with a stack of documents and his schedule for the day. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she greeted efficiently. "I remind you that today is the company's Christmas charity program day. You need to select a letter to respond to personally." John grunted in disapproval. The Letters to Santa program was the marketing department's idea, an attempt to humanize the company's image. He considered it all a waste of time. "Can't we just make a donation and be done with it?" he asked, irritated. Jessica smiled patiently. "You know that the personal participation of executives is crucial to the program's success. Besides, the press will be present." John sighed in defeat. "Fine, bring the letters." Minutes later, sitting at his massive mahogany desk, John stared at a pile of colorful envelopes. Letters from children all over the world, all hoping for a Christmas miracle. "Let's get this over with," he muttered, closing his eyes and picking an envelope at random. The envelope was simple, almost austere compared to the others. The uneven handwriting on the address clearly indicated a child's hand. John opened the envelope and began to read. "Dear Santa, my name is Lily Evans and I am 10 years old. I live in Hollybrook, a small town in Vermont. I know you must be very busy making toys for all the children in the world, but this year I need to ask for something different. My mom is very sick and we don't have money for the medicine she needs. The doctors say she can get better, but we need help. I know I'm not the only child in the world with problems, but if you can, Santa, please bring a miracle for my mom. I don't need presents this year. I just want her to get well. Hopefully, Lily." John felt his throat tighten. Lily's words transported him back to that cold kitchen in the Bronx, to the despair of seeing his mother wasting away without being able to do anything. With trembling hands, he reread the letter. Every word seemed to echo his own story, his own childhood despair. For a moment, He was no longer the powerful CEO John Thompson, but little Johnny, helpless and scared. "Mr. Thompson," Jessica's voice brought him back to reality. "Are you all right?" John realized he had tears in his eyes. He quickly wiped them away, embarrassed by this display of emotion. "Yes, I'm fine," he replied, his voice hoarse. "Jessica, cancel my appointments for the rest of the week." "But sir, the board meeting—" "Cancel everything," John interrupted, his voice regaining its usual firmness. "And prepare the private jet. We're going to Vermont." Jessica, accustomed to her boss's eccentricities, simply nodded and left to make the arrangements. Alone again, John looked out the window at the New York skyline. For the first time in years, he felt something awaken within him, a mixture of determination and hope. "Hold on, Lily," he murmured, clutching the letter to his chest. "A help is on the way." As the winter sun bathed the city in its golden light, John Thompson, the lonely millionaire, felt he was about to embark on the most important journey of his life. A journey that would take him not only to a small town in Vermont, but back to his own past and perhaps to a future he never dared to imagine. And so on. John Thompson's private jet sliced through the night sky towards Vermont, leaving behind the twinkling lights of New York City. Sitting alone in the luxurious cabin, John swirled a glass of untouched whiskey, his thoughts as turbulent as the clouds outside. Lily's letter, now carefully folded in his jacket's inner pocket, weighed like lead. Each word evoked memories he had long buried deep within. Flashback. Bronx Hospital, 1974. Little Johnny, only 9 years old, held his mother's cold hand. The monotonous beeping of machines filled the sterile hospital room. "Mum, please don't go," whispered Johnny, tears streaming down his freckled face. Sarah, pale and weak, opened her eyes slowly. "My dear Johnny," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Be strong. Promise me you'll be strong." Johnny nodded, swallowing his tears. "I promise, Mom." Sarah smiled faintly, her eyes closing for the last time. "Present." John shook his head, pushing away the painful memory. He picked up his tablet, reviewing the details his team had gathered about Lily and her mother. Mary Evans. Mary, 35, a widow, worked as a florist until she fell ill 6 months ago. Diagnosis: a rare form of bacterial pneumonia, complicated by a weakened immune system. Treatment was available, but the cost was astronomical for a lower middle-class family in rural Vermont. "There's not this time," John murmured to himself. "This time, I'll make a difference." As the plane began its descent into Burlington International Airport, John reflected on the strangeness of his situation. Here he was, one of the most powerful men in the world, flying across the country because of a letter from a child he had never met. What would his shareholders say? The board would certainly question his sanity, and the press. He could imagine the sensational headlines, "Lonely billionaire has emotional breakdown." But for the first time in years, John didn't care what others thought. Something inside him, something long dormant, had awakened. After landing in Burlington, John swapped his jet for a rented SUV. As he drove southeast towards Hollybrook, the landscape gradually changed. Cityscapes gave way to rolling green hills and dense forests, dotted with small towns and villages. Finally, Hollybrook appeared on the horizon. From a distance, it looked like a picture postcard. Quaint houses with snow-covered roofs, narrow streets lined with trees, a church with a towering steeple in the center of town. He parked on Main Street, causing a slight stir among the locals. John stepped out, adjusting his overcoat, feeling strangely out of place in this idyllic setting. A middle-aged man, dressed simply, approached. "Mr. Thompson," he asked with a friendly smile, "I'm David Miller, the mayor of Hollybrook. Welcome to our town." John shook David's hand, noticing the curious glances of residents gathering at a distance. "Thank you for the welcome, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking for Lily Evans and her mother, Mary." David's smile faltered slightly. "Ah, the Evans family. Yes, a sad situation. Come, let's go to my office. We can talk better there." As they walked along Main Street, John couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between his expensive attire and the simple buildings, the modest shops, and the residents in their winter clothes. He felt like an outsider in this close-knit community. In the small town hall office, David offered John a cup of strong coffee in a chipped mug. "Mr. Thompson, I must say your arrival is unexpected. May I ask the reason for your interest in the Evans family?" John hesitated. How could he explain something he himself barely understood? "It's complicated," he finally replied. "Let's just say I want to help. Where can I find them?" David frowned. "Unfortunately, it's not that simple. Mary and Lily moved a few weeks ago. The medical bills, well, they lost their house." John felt a tightness in his chest. "Moved? Where to?" "No one knows for sure," David sighed. "There are rumors they went to the city, maybe Burlington, looking for treatment. But Mary was too weak to travel, as we're all worried." John stood up abruptly, frustration evident in his voice. "Oh, there must be some record or some clue. They can't have just disappeared." David raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Sir, I understand your concern, but here in Hollybrook, we respect each other's privacy. If Mary chose not to disclose her whereabouts—" John interrupted, his voice trembling with contained emotion. "You don't understand. I need to find them. I made a promise." The mayor looked at John with a mixture of curiosity and compassion. "Mr. Thompson, forgive me for asking, but why is this so important to you?" John was silent for a moment, looking out the window at the town square. Children were playing near the snow-covered fountain, their laughter echoing in the quiet afternoon. For an instant, he saw himself, little Johnny, alone and scared after his mother's death. "Because," he finally replied, his voice barely a whisper, "a long time ago, I was Lily, and no one came to help me." David nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "I see," he said softly. "Well, Mr. Thompson, perhaps we can start by asking at Mary's old flower shop. Someone there might know something." As they left the office, John felt a renewed determination. He would find Lily and Mary, no matter the cost. This was no longer just about fulfilling a promise made to an unknown child. It was about redemption, about righting a wrong from the past. And as the sun began to set over Hollybrook, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, John Thompson, the New York billionaire, took the first step on a journey that would change not only Lily and Mary's lives, but also his own, in ways he could never have imagined. The sun was already setting as John Thompson, guided by Mayor Miller, arrived at a quiet street on the outskirts of Hollybrook. The houses here were modest, some with weather-beaten facades and patched-up windows. At the end of the street, partially hidden by a large pine tree, stood a small two-story house, its peeling paint and overgrown garden telling a silent story of hardship. "This is it," said David, pointing to the house. "The former owner of the flower shop told us Mary and Lily moved here a few weeks ago. It's Mary's late aunt's house." John felt his heart quicken. After days of fruitless searching, he was finally about to meet Lily and her mother. He adjusted his tie, a nervous gesture he hadn't made since his early days on Wall Street. "Thank you, David," John said, his voice betraying a mixture of anxiety and determination. "I think I should do this alone now." David nodded understandingly. "Good luck, Mr. Thompson. And remember, Hollybrook is a small community. Treat them with kindness." With a final wave, David walked away, leaving John alone in front of the modest house. The businessman took a deep breath and walked up the short stone path to the front door. He noticed the weeds growing between the cracks, the faded curtains in the windows, the faint sound of a television coming from inside. John hesitated for a moment before knocking. What would he say? How would he explain his presence? Before he could reconsider, his fist had already rapped 3 times on the worn wood of the door. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then light footsteps approached, and the door opened slowly, revealing a girl with brown hair and curious eyes. "Lily?" "Hello," said John, his voice softer than usual. "You must be Lily." The girl's eyes widened in surprise. Before she could answer, a weak voice called from inside the house, "Lily, who is it?" Lily looked back, then again at John. It's a man, Mom. He knows my name." Shuffling footsteps approached, and soon a thin, pale woman appeared behind Lily. Mary Evans looked much older than her 35 years, with deep, dark circles and an expression of permanent weariness on her face. "Can I help you?" Mary asked, her voice a mixture of suspicion and exhaustion. John swallowed hard. "Mrs. Evans, my name is John Thompson. I received Lily's letter." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, Lily's eyes lit up with a mixture of hope and disbelief. You're the angel Santa sent," she whispered. Mary placed a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. "What are you talking about, sir? What letter?" John carefully took the folded letter from his jacket pocket. "Lily wrote to Santa, asking for help for you, Mrs. Evans. That letter reached me through a charity program in New York." Mary took the letter with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the words written by her daughter. Tears began to well up in her eyes. "Please," John continued softly, "I would like to help if you'll allow me." Mary looked at John, then at Lily, who was watching the scene with hopeful eyes. Finally, she stepped aside. "Come in, Mr. Thompson. I think we have a lot to talk about." The interior of the house was as modest as the exterior suggested. A faded sofa, a scratched coffee table, and an old television were the only furniture visible. The air was thick with the smell of dampness and medicine. "Please, sit down," Mary offered, gesturing towards the sofa. She herself sat in a worn armchair, with Lily settling on the armrest next to her mother. John looked around, noticing the details that told the story of this family's struggle. There were visible patches on the curtains, a stack of bills on the side table, and he could swear he heard the hum of a broken heater trying to work. "Mrs. Evans," John began, "I know my presence here must seem strange, perhaps even invasive. But when I read Lily's letter, I felt I had to do something." Mary coughed slightly, a sound that made Lily flinch with worry. "Mr. Thompson, I appreciate your concern, but I don't understand. Why would a stranger from New York care about our situation?" John hesitated, pondering how to explain. "When I was a child, I was in a very similar situation to Lily's. My mother was sick. We didn't have money for treatment. She didn't survive." He paused, swallowing the lump that had formed in his throat. "I promised myself that if I ever had the means, I wouldn't let another child go through what I went through." Lily, who had remained silent until then, spoke softly. "You really came to help us?" John smiled gently at the girl. "Yes, Lily. If your mother allows it, I want to help with the medical treatment, the bills, whatever is necessary." Mary seemed torn between gratitude and pride. "Sir, your offer is very generous, but—" "Please," John interrupted softly, "don't think of it as charity. Think of it as a second chance, for you, for Lily's, and for me." There was a moment of tense silence. Then, as if the universe wanted to emphasize the urgency of the situation, the lights flickered and went out. "Oh no," Mary whispered, defeat evident in her voice. "The electricity. I couldn't pay the bill this month." John immediately stood up. "Where is the power company?" "Downtown, but it must be closed by now," Mary replied, confused. "Don't worry about that," John said, already heading for the door. "Lily, can you show me where the local market is?" Lily nodded enthusiastically, taking John's hand without hesitation. Mary watched, still stunned, as her daughter led the strange man out of the house. In the following hours, Hollybrook witnessed an unusual scene. John Thompson, still in his expensive overcoat, carried shopping bags through the snow-dusted streets, closely followed by an animated Lily. He paid the overdue bills, bought groceries to fill the Evans' empty pantry, and even arranged for a new heater to be delivered the next morning. When they returned to the house, they found Mary sitting on the porch steps, silent tears streaming down her face. The lights in the house were on again. "Mom," Lily exclaimed, running to hug her. "Mr. Thompson brought food, and he fixed the lights." Mary looked at John, who stood awkwardly with the shopping bags. "Why?" she asked simply. "Why do all this for us?" John put the bags down and knelt to meet Mary's eyes. "Because everyone deserves a Christmas miracle now and then," he replied softly, "and because your daughter had the courage to ask for help when you couldn't." In that moment, something shifted in the air. The suspicion in Mary's eyes gave way to cautious gratitude. Lily hugged John impulsively, murmuring "thank you" repeatedly. and John Thompson, the lonely billionaire from New York, felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, the warmth of a genuine human connection. As the stars began to appear in the night sky over Hollybrook, he knew his life would never be the same. Morning sun bathed the streets of Hollybrook, but the golden glow couldn't dispel the shadows of distrust that were beginning to form. At the corner cafe, the local gathering spot, tongues wagged with speculation about the mysterious man who had arrived in town. "I heard he's a billionaire," whispered Mrs. Peterson, the baker, leaning over her cup of coffee. "Sir, but what would such a rich man want with the Evans family?" "Maybe he's a distant relative," suggested Mr. Jones, the retired postman. "Or worse, maybe he wants to buy the whole town." David, the mayor, sitting in a corner booth, listened to the conversations with growing concern. He knew William Thompson's arrival was motivated by good intentions, but explaining this to a small, traditional community would be a challenge. Meanwhile, in the modest Evans house, Mary stared at the pile of shopping bags in the kitchen with a mixture of gratitude and unease. The refrigerator, once nearly empty, now overflowed with fresh food. The bills, which a few days ago seemed like insurmountable mountains, were all paid. Lily entered the kitchen, her eyes shining with excitement. "Mom, Mr. Thompson is taking me to buy school supplies today. Can I go, please?" Mary hesitated. John's generosity was overwhelming, and a part of her wanted to refuse, to maintain her dignity. But seeing the enthusiasm on her daughter's face, she found herself giving in. "All right, dear, but don't ask for anything extravagant, understand?" Outside, John waited in his rented SUV. He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, battling his own doubts. Flashback New York 1 week earlier. "John, are you crazy?" The voice of his ex-wife, Catherine, echoed through the phone. "Dropping everything to help a strange family in Vermont. The board is going to crucify you." John sighed, rubbing his temples. "Kathy, you don't understand. I need to do this." "No, you don't," Catherine retorted. "I want to redeem yourself for the past, but that's not how it works. You can't save everyone, John." Catherine's words still echoed in his mind. Was he just trying to fill a void in his own life, using Lily and Mary as substitutes for the family he never had? His thoughts were interrupted when Lily ran out of the house, a radiant smile on her face. "I'm ready, Mr. Thompson." John forced a smile, pushing away his worries. "Let's go then. How about we start at the bookstore?" As they drove through town, John noticed the curious and sometimes hostile glances of the locals. In the bookstore, the atmosphere was tense. The owner, Mrs. Davies, watched John's every move with narrowed eyes, as if expecting him to steal something at any moment. Lily, oblivious to the tension, ran from shelf to shelf, marveling at the variety of books and school supplies. "Look, Mr. Thompson, can I have this notebook too?" John nodded, his heart warmed by the girl's enthusiasm. But when they reached the cashier, Mrs. Davies crossed her arms. "I'm sorry, but we don't accept out-of-state checks," she said coldly. John frowned, but I saw the Visa sticker on the door. "The machine is down," Mrs. Davies replied curtly. Sensing the growing hostility, John pulled out some cash. "All right, I'll pay with this." As they left the store, Lily tugged on John's sleeve. "Mr. Thompson, why was Mrs. Davies so angry?" John sighed, searching for the right words. "Sometimes, Lily, people are afraid of what they don't know. But don't worry, everything will be all right." Back at the Evans house, Mary waited on the porch, her face a mask of worry. When Lily ran to show her new school supplies, Mary pulled John aside. "Mr. Thompson," she began, her voice tense, "I appreciate everything you've done, but maybe it's best if you stop here." John felt a knot form in his stomach. "Mary, I understand your concern, but—" "No, you don't understand," Mary interrupted, her voice trembling slightly. "People are talking. They're saying you have ulterior motives, that you want to take Lily away from me. I can't risk losing my daughter." The words hit John like a punch. "Mary, I swear, I would never do that. I'm only here to help." At that moment, a group of residents, led by Mrs. Peterson and Mr. Jones, approached the house. Their faces were tense, their postures defensive. "Mrs. Evans," called Mrs. Peterson, "we've come to express our concern. This outsider can't be trusted. Think of Lily's well-being. John stepped forward, trying to calm the situation. Please, I understand your concerns, but I assure you my intentions are purely— Silence, shouted Mr. Jones. We don't want to hear your rich man's lies. Go back to New York and leave our community in peace. The situation was spiraling out of control. Lily, frightened by the shouting, clung to her mother's skirt, tears welling up in her eyes. Mom, why are they yelling at Mr. Thompson? He just wants to help. Mary, torn between fear and gratitude, didn't know how to react. John, feeling the weight of all the hostile stares, took a step back. I'm sorry, he murmured. I never meant to cause any trouble. Maybe it's best if I leave. As John turned to go, his heart heavy, Lily's voice cut through the tense air. No, please don't go. Everyone turned to the girl, surprised by her outburst. Lily, with tears streaming down her face, continued, Mr. Thompson is good. He helped when no one else did. Please, don't send him away. A heavy silence fell over the group. Mary, seeing the despair in her daughter's eyes, felt her resolve waver. She remembered all the nights she cried alone, fearing she couldn't provide a future for Lily. And now, when help had finally arrived, was she about to reject it out of fear and pride? Slowly, Mary stepped forward, placing herself beside John. My friends, she began, her voice trembling but determined. I know you're worried. I was too. But Mr. Thompson has been nothing but kind and generous. He doesn't deserve our distrust. John looked at Mary, surprised and touched by her words. The residents exchanged uncertain glances, the hostility on their faces slowly giving way to confusion and, in some cases, shame. David, who had been watching everything in silence, finally spoke. Perhaps we were hasty in our judgments. Mr. Thompson, I apologize on behalf of Hollybrook. Can we start over? John nodded slowly, a small smile forming on his lips. I would like that very much. As the crowd began to disperse, murmuring embarrassed apologies, Lily ran to hug John. Thank you for not leaving, she whispered. At that moment, looking at Lily and Mary and at the now more open faces of the Hollybrook residents, John felt something shift within him. The doubts and demons that had plagued him seemed less daunting. Perhaps, he thought, this wasn't just a journey to help Lily and Mary. Perhaps it was a journey to find himself, to heal old wounds, and who knows, to finally find a place to call home. Night fell gently over Hollybrook, draping the small town in a blanket of serenity. In the Evans house, a comforting silence hung in the air, broken only by the soft crackling of the newly lit fireplace. John, Mary, and Lily sat in the modest living room, each holding a mug of hot chocolate, courtesy of Mrs. Peterson, a peace offering after the turbulent events of the day. John stared into the dancing flames, lost in thought. The confrontation with the townspeople had stirred something deep within him, bringing to the surface long-buried memories. He knew it was time to share his story. When I was about your age, Lily, John began, his voice soft, almost a whisper, my mother became very ill. Lily and Mary leaned forward slightly, their eyes fixed on John. We were poor, he continued. We lived in a tough neighborhood in the Bronx. My father, well, he wasn't around. It was just me and my mum. John paused, taking a sip of his hot chocolate to soothe the lump forming in his throat. She worked 2 jobs to support us. When she got sick, we didn't have money for proper treatment. I watched her wither away day by day, unable to do anything to help. Mary reached out instinctively, touching John's arm in a gesture of comfort. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, recognizing in his story echoes of her own struggle. She died when I was 10, John said, his voice choked with emotion. I ended up in the foster care system. It was difficult. I promised myself that if I ever had the means, I would do everything in my power to prevent other children from going through what I went through. Lily, with tears silently streaming down her cheeks, rose from her seat and hugged John tightly. I'm so sorry, Mr. Thompson, she murmured against his chest. John, surprised by the display of affection, hugged Lily back, feeling a comforting warmth spread through his chest. When Lily returned to her seat, Mary discreetly wiped a tear before speaking. I think it's my turn to share, she said softly. 2 years ago, I was a successful florist here in Hollybrook. Lily and I had a comfortable life. But then, I started feeling tired all the time. At first, I thought it was just stress. Mary paused, taking a sip of her hot chocolate. When I finally went to the doctor, the diagnosis was devastating. A rare form of pneumonia, complicated by a weakened immune system. The treatment was expensive, far beyond what I could afford. The medical bills started piling up, she continued. I had to sell the flower shop, then our house. We moved here to my aunt's house when she passed away. I am desperate, trying to give Lily a decent life while battling this illness. John listened attentively, his heart heavy with Mary's story. Lily, who already knew part of the story, still seemed shaken by hearing her mother speak openly about her struggles. "Mom," Lily said hesitantly, "I think I need to tell you something too." She looked nervously between her mother and John before continuing. "Remember when you told me Santa couldn't help us this year? Well, I wrote a letter to him anyway." Mary looked at her daughter, surprised. "Lily, I asked for a miracle," Lily continued hurriedly. "I asked for help for you, Mom. And then," she turned to John, her eyes shining, "Mr. Thompson appeared, like an angel Santa sent." A stunned silence fell over the room. John felt his heart clench with Lily's innocent words. Mary covered her mouth with her hand, tears finally escaping her eyes. "Oh, my darling," Mary whispered, pulling Lily into a tight hug. "You are so brave and so good." John watched the scene, feeling simultaneously intrusive and an integral part of this intimate moment. Just then, a soft knock on the door surprised them. Mary stood up to answer, wiping away her tears. Opening the door, she found David, the mayor, accompanied by several residents, including Mrs. Peterson and Mr. Jones. "Excuse us for interrupting," David said, looking slightly embarrassed, "but we couldn't stay home knowing Mary and Lily were going through this alone." Mrs. Peterson stepped forward, holding a basket filled with fresh bread and cookies. "It's true, Mr. Thompson. We misjudged your intentions. Please accept this as an apology from the whole community." John joined Mary at the door, touched by the gesture. "There's no need for apologies," he said softly. "I understand your concern for Mary and Lily. They're lucky to have such a protective community." The residents exchanged looks of relief and gratitude. David smiled, and extending his hand to John. "Welcome to Hollybrook, Mr. Thompson. Truly, this time." As John shook David's hand, he felt Lily join him and Mary at the door. The girl smiled radiantly at the neighbors, her presence a vivid reminder of why they were all there. At that moment, under the starry sky of Hollybrook, with the aroma of fresh bread in the air and the warmth of acceptance surrounding them, John felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, a sense of belonging. Looking at Mary and Lily, and then at the now friendly faces of the residents, he realized that his journey of redemption had transformed into something much greater. It was no longer just about helping a family in need. It was about healing old wounds, forming new connections, and perhaps finally finding a place to call home. And as the night progressed, filled with laughter, shared stories and promises of a new beginning, John knew his life would never be the same. The sun had barely risen when John Thompson, sitting at the small kitchen table in the Evans house, began a series of phone calls. His open laptop displayed emails from medical specialists across the country, each detailing possible treatments for Mary's condition. "Dr. Miller." "Yes, it's John Thompson. About the case we discussed." John spoke in a low voice, aware that Mary and Lily were still asleep. After hours of conversations and negotiations, John finally hung up the phone, rubbing his tired eyes. A smile of relief formed on his face as he heard soft footsteps approaching. "Good morning," Mary said softly, entering the kitchen. She looked pale and tired, but there was a spark of curiosity in her eyes. "You've been up for a long time." John nodded, gesturing to the chair beside him. "Mary, I have news. I managed to schedule an appointment with Dr. Miller in Boston. He's one of the leading specialists in your condition." Mary sat down slowly, her eyes widening at the news. "Boston? But how? When?" "Next week," John replied, gently placing his hand over hers. "Mary, I know it's a lot to process. but this could be our best chance. Tears began to form in Mary's eyes. She quickly wiped them away, battling a mixture of emotions, hope, fear, gratitude, and a pang of wounded pride. "This is too kind of you, John, but I can't accept. The cost—" "Don't worry about the cost," John interrupted softly. "Please, Mary, let me do this. For you, for Lily's, and for me." At that moment, Lily entered the kitchen, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Seeing the tears in her mother's eyes, she froze. "Mum, what's wrong?" Mary opened her arms, and Lily rushed to hug her. "It's all right, darling. In fact, things might be about to get much better." As Mary explained the situation to Lily, John watched the interaction between mother and daughter. Lily's initial fear soon gave way to cautious hope, her eyes shining with the possibility of seeing her mother healthy again. In the days that followed, the Evans house was transformed into a whirlwind of activity. John coordinated the preparations for the trip to Boston, while Mary rode an emotional roller coaster. There were moments of excitement, when she allowed herself to dream of a future free from illness, and moments of dread, when the fear of the unknown threatened to overwhelm her. Lily, in turn, oscillated between almost frantic excitement and quiet anxiety. One evening, John found her sitting alone on the porch, looking at the stars. "Is everything all right, Lily?" he asked, sitting beside her. Lily bit her lip, hesitant. "Mr. Thompson, what if it doesn't work? What if the doctor can't help Mom?" John felt his heart clench. He put a comforting arm around Lily's shoulders. "Sometimes, Lily, all we can do is hope and do our best. Your mother is strong and she has you by her side. That's already a big advantage." Lily nodded slowly, leaning into John's embrace. "Thank you for being here with us," she whispered. On the eve of their trip to Boston, the Hollybrook community gathered for a small farewell party. The Evans house was filled with neighbors, each bringing a dish of food or words of encouragement. Mrs. Peterson brought an apple pie especially for Lily, while Mr. Jones presented Mary with a bouquet of flowers from his greenhouse. Amidst the festivities, John's phone rang. He stepped aside to answer, his face turning serious as he listened. It was Jessica, his assistant in New York, informing him of growing problems at the company due to his prolonged absence. "I understand," John said, his voice tense. "Do what you can to calm the board. I'll be back as soon as possible." When he returned to the living room, Mary immediately noticed his worried expression. "Is everything all right, John?" He forced a smile. "Nothing you need to worry about. Let's focus on you now." The next morning, as the taxi took them to the airport, John looked at Mary and Lily, sitting side by side in the back seat. Despite the evident fatigue on Mary's face, there was a determination in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Lily held her mother's hand tightly, as if trying to convey all her strength through that touch. During the flight to Boston, John reflected on how his life had changed in the past few weeks. He, who had always considered himself a loner, focused only on business, now found himself deeply involved in the lives of Mary and Lily. Their well-being had become as important as any deal he had ever closed. Upon arriving at the hospital in Boston, they were greeted by Dr. Miller, a middle-aged man with kind eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. He greeted Mary warmly before turning to John. "Mr. Thompson, it's an honor to meet you in person. Your commitment to this case is admirable." John nodded, feeling strangely emotional. "Thank you for seeing us so quickly, Doctor. Mary and Lily's, they've become very important to me." While Dr. Miller led Mary away for the initial examinations, John and Lily waited in the waiting room. Lily, nervous, took John's hand, surprising him. "Mr. Thompson," she said softly, "do you think we could ever be a real family?" The question caught John off guard. He looked at the girl, seeing in her not only the frightened child who had written a letter to Santa, but also a reflection of his own past, of his own hopes and fears. "Lily," he replied, his voice gentle, "I think, in a way, we already are." At that moment, sitting side by side in a Boston hospital waiting room, John realized that his journey of redemption had transformed into something much deeper. It was no longer just about helping Mary and Lily. It was about finding the family he never knew he needed. And as they waited for news that could change their lives forever, John, Lily, and Mary, even separated by an examination room door, were united by something stronger than blood ties, a bond forged by compassion, hope, and a love that transcended all expectations. The steady rhythm of the heart monitors echoed through the treatment room, a constant reminder of the battle Mary was fighting. 2 weeks had passed since the start of the experimental treatment in Boston, and what had begun with cautious optimism was now turning into a roller coaster of emotions. Dr. Miller frowned, examining the latest results of Mary's tests. "I'm not satisfied with these numbers," he murmured, more to himself than to the others in the room. John, who hadn't left Mary's side since the beginning of the treatment, felt his heart clench. "What does that mean, Doctor?" The doctor sighed, taking off his glasses and rubbing his tired eyes. "Mrs. Evans, body isn't responding to the treatment as we'd hoped. We're seeing some worrying side effects." Mary, pale and visibly exhausted, squeezed Lily's hand, who was sitting next to her bed. "What are our options, Dr. Miller?" "We can adjust the protocol," the doctor replied, putting his glasses back on. "But that will mean a more aggressive treatment, with potentially greater risks." A heavy silence fell over the room. John felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. It was his insistence that brought Mary to this experimental treatment. What if... His thoughts were interrupted by the shrill ringing of his cell phone. Murmuring an apology, he stepped out into the corridor to answer. "John?" Jessica's voice, his assistant in New York, sounded frantic. "We have a critical situation here. The board is threatening a vote of no confidence. They're questioning your leadership due to your prolonged absence." John closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the world on him. "How bad is it, Jess?" "Bad, John. Very bad. They're talking about appointing an interim CEO. You need to come back immediately." At that moment, John heard a sob coming from the treatment room. Looking through the window, he saw Lily crying in Mary's arms, the two clinging to each other as if their lives depended on it. "John," Jessica's voice sounded distant. "Are you listening? When can you come back?" He hesitated, his gaze fixed on the scene before him. "Fighty, I'll call you back, Jess." Hanging up the phone, John returned to the room, his heart torn between the worlds he had created for himself. Lily looked at him, her eyes red and filled with fear. "Mr. Thompson," she whispered, "are you going to leave us now?" The question hit John like a punch to the gut. He saw in those childish eyes the reflection of his own past, the fear of abandonment that had haunted him his entire life. "Lily, he began, but was interrupted by a knock on the door. To everyone's surprise, David, the mayor of Hollybrook, entered the room, followed by Mrs. Peterson, Mr. Jones, and several other townspeople. "Forgive us for intruding," David said, his voice gentle, "but we couldn't stay home knowing Mary and Lily were going through this alone." Mrs. Peterson approached the bed, carrying a basket filled with homemade treats. "We brought a little bit of comfort from home," she said, smiling warmly at Mary. Mr. Jones placed a bouquet of fresh flowers on the nightstand. "And these are from the community garden. Everyone in town sent their best wishes." Mary, with tears in her eyes, looked at the familiar faces around her. I don't know what to say. Thank you all." John watched the scene, feeling a mixture of emotions. The community he once saw as hostile was now demonstrating compassion and unity that left him speechless. Lily, still holding her mother's hand, looked at John with pleading eyes. "Please, Mr. Thompson, don't go." At that moment, surrounded by the warmth of the Hollybrook community and confronted with Lily's gaze, John felt something shift within him. All his life, he had chased success, power, and wealth, believing that it would fill the void left by the loss of his mother. But here, in this hospital room, he found something no million-dollar deal could buy: genuine human connection. With sudden clarity, John made his decision. He approached Mary's bed, taking her free hand and Lily's. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice firm and resolute. "We're in this together, all of us." The relief on Lily's face was palpable, and Mary squeezed his hand in silent gratitude. John turned to Dr. Miller. "Doctor, I want you to use all the necessary resources to adjust Mary's treatment. Cost is no object. We'll do whatever it takes." The doctor nodded, a new glint of determination in his eyes. Understood, Mr. Thompson. We'll redouble our efforts." While the medical team prepared to initiate the new treatment protocol, John stepped aside to make a call. "Jessica, it's me. Call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. I'll participate via video conference." "But John, they want you here in person." "No, Jess. My place is here right now. If the board can't understand that, then maybe it's time to reevaluate my position at the company." Hanging up the phone, John felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in his adult life, he was putting people before business, his heart before reason. Returning to Mary and Lily's side, John found himself enveloped in a group hug with the residents of Hollybrook. In that moment, he understood that he had found something far more valuable than any corporate empire, a family and a community. And as Mary's new treatment began, bringing with it renewed hope and unknown challenges, John knew that regardless of the outcome, they would face it together. Because sometimes, life's greatest turnarounds come not from external successes, but from internal changes, from choices that define who we truly are. The afternoon sun filtered through the hospital windows, casting long shadows across the room where Mary rested. John sat beside her, absently flipping through a stack of documents Jessica had sent from New York. It was a routine he had established in recent weeks, dividing his time between caring for Mary and Lily and trying to keep his company running from afar. It was then that his eyes caught something that made his blood run cold. An old report, buried among contracts and financial statements, detailed the operations of a Thompson Enterprises subsidiary in Vermont, a factory located just a few miles from Hollybrook. John began to read avidly, his heart pounding with each paragraph. The factory, specializing in industrial chemicals, had been accused of illegally dumping toxic waste about 5 years ago. The company had vehemently denied the accusations at the time, and the case was dismissed due to lack of concrete evidence. Flashbacks flooded John's mind. 5 years earlier, a boardroom in New York. "Mr. Thompson, we have a problem with our factory in Vermont," said a nervous executive. "There are accusations of environmental contamination." John, focused on a major merger at the time, barely looked up from his papers. Deal with it. Deny everything. Hire the best lawyers. "We can't have this kind of negative publicity now." "But sir, what if the accusations are true?" John finally looked at the executive, his eyes cold. "I said, deal with it. Do whatever it takes." Present, John felt a wave of nausea as he realized the magnitude of what he had done. His negligence, his greed. They had directly contributed to Mary's illness and potentially to that of other Hollybrook residents. He stood up abruptly, stumbling to the bathroom where he vomited violently. Looking at himself in the mirror, John barely recognized the man staring back. A pale face, eyes haunted by overwhelming guilt. How could he have been so blind, so indifferent to the suffering his decisions could cause? "John," Mary's weak voice called from the room, "is everything all right?" He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. The weight of the truth crushed him. How could he tell her? How could he face Lily knowing he was partly responsible for their suffering? Returning to the room, John found not only Mary awake, but also Lily, who had just arrived with David for a visit. "Mr. Thompson, you look pale," Lily commented, concern evident in her voice. "Did something happen?" John felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. He knew he could no longer hide the truth. With trembling hands, he picked up the report. "Mary, Lily, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice breaking. "Something terrible I've discovered." In the following minutes, John revealed everything. The factory, the contamination accusations, his order to cover it all up. As he spoke, he saw the horror grow in Mary's eyes and the confusion turn to hurt on Lily's face. "Oh, you knew," Mary whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief and anger. "All this time, you knew what caused my illness." "No, I swear I didn't know specifically about you," John pleaded, feeling his world crumble. "I just discovered the connection. But I should have investigated further at the time. I should have cared more. I was selfish and negligent." Lily recoiled from John, tears streaming down her face. "You lied to us. You're not an angel. You're the reason my mom is sick." Lily's words were like daggers to John's heart. He reached out, trying to reach her. But the girl backed away, fear and disappointment evident in her eyes. David, who had listened to everything in silence, finally spoke, his voice heavy with disappointment and contained anger. "Mr. Thompson, this is unforgivable. You need to leave now." "No, please," John begged, feeling panic rise. "Let me fix this. I can do something. I have resources. We can clean up the area, compensate the people affected." "Get out," Mary shouted, with more force than seemed possible in her weakened state. "I don't want to see you again, ever." Heartbroken, John stumbled out of the room. In the hallway, he encountered several Hollybrook residents who had come to visit Mary. Noticing his expression and the shouts coming from the room, they quickly realized something was wrong. "What did you do?" Mrs. Peterson demanded, her face contorted with anger. Within minutes, the news spread like wildfire. John Thompson, the supposed benefactor, was actually the villain behind Mary's suffering, and potentially that of others in the community. Surrounded by hostile faces, John found himself cornered in the hospital lobby. Accusations and insults rained down on him from all sides. "Liar! Murderer! How could you do this to us?" John, overwhelmed by guilt and shame, couldn't find the words to defend himself. He knew he deserved their anger, their hatred. Everything he had built with Mary and Lily, the trust he had earned from the community, it was all crumbling around him in mere moments. As hospital security rushed to escort him out, concerned for his own safety, John caught one last glimpse of Lily through the crowd. The look of betrayal and desolation in her eyes was more painful than any physical blow could be. Outside the hospital, alone on the sidewalk, John Thompson, once a powerful CEO, now a broken man, faced the consequences of his past actions. The truth had come out, and with it, the destruction of the new life and connections he had formed. As the sun set over Boston, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch out like accusing fingers, John realized that his journey of redemption had taken a devastating turn. The road ahead would be more difficult than anything he had ever faced, and he wasn't sure if there was any coming back from this betrayal. With heavy steps and an even heavier heart, John walked away from the hospital, from Mary and Lily, from the community that had briefly accepted him. The weight of his guilt and the uncertain future ahead were his only companions as he disappeared into the growing darkness of the Boston night. That night, in his hotel room, John faced the man in the mirror. Lily's words echoed in his mind, "You're not an angel." He realized that in his quest for redemption, he had inadvertently caused more pain. The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. In trying to right the wrongs of the past, he had unearthed an even greater wrong. John spent a sleepless night, reviewing every decision that had led him to this moment. From the order to cover up the contamination to his arrival in Hollybrook, every choice, every action now seemed tainted by the shadow of his past negligence. When the sun rose, bringing a new day, John Thompson made a decision. He wouldn't run away this time. He wouldn't cover up the truth. He would face the consequences of his actions, no matter the personal or professional cost. With renewed determination, he picked up the phone. It was time to do the right thing, even if it was too late to save what he had built with Mary and Lily. John knew the road ahead would be arduous, but he was prepared to face it. Because sometimes, true redemption comes not from heroic acts, but from accepting responsibility for our failures and working tirelessly to correct them. The rising sun painted the Boston sky with soft hues of pink and orange as John Thompson left his hotel room. His eyes, marked by deep circles, reflected a sleepless night, but also a renewed determination. With firm steps, he headed to the law firm he had contacted the night before. Hours later, a press conference was hastily convened. Journalists from all over Vermont and national correspondents crowded in front of the State House in Montpelier. The murmuring ceased when John stepped up to the podium, his face a mask of seriousness. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice steady despite the inner turmoil. "I'm here today to make a confession and a commitment." In the following minutes, John revealed everything: the contamination caused by his company in Hollybrook, the subsequent cover-up, and his personal responsibility in the entire process. Cameras flashed incessantly, capturing every expression of remorse and determination. Starting today, John continued, I am initiating a comprehensive environmental cleanup project in Hollybrook and the surrounding areas. In addition, a compensation fund will be established for all those affected by the contamination. The journalists erupted in questions, but John raised his hand, asking for silence. That's not all. I am completely restructuring Thompson Enterprises. Our primary focus from now on will be social and environmental responsibility. Any executive involved in the cover-up will be removed, and I am making myself available to the authorities for any necessary investigations. As the press conference continued, the news spread rapidly. In Hollybrook, residents gathered in front of the television at the corner cafe, watching John's confession in stunned silence. At the hospital, Mary watched the broadcast in her room, Lily by her side. The young mother's emotions oscillated between anger, confusion, and a reluctant flicker of admiration for John's courage in taking responsibility. "Mom," Lily said softly, "what does this mean for us?" Mary hugged her daughter, feeling the weight of the decision they would have to make. "I don't know, darling. We need to think about this very carefully." In the days that followed, Hollybrook was transformed into a whirlwind of activity. Environmental cleanup crews arrived daily, scientists collected soil and water samples, and representatives from the compensation fund went door to door, explaining the process to residents. The community, however, was divided. Some, like Mrs. Peterson, saw John's efforts as a genuine attempt at amends. He could have run away, but he stayed to fix things, she argued at the corner cafe. That has to count for something. Others, like Mr. Jones, remained skeptical. "Money doesn't erase what he did," the retired postman grumbled. How many others got sick because of him? At the center of this storm, John worked tirelessly. He personally supervised the cleanup efforts, met with local authorities, and spent hours listening to the concerns of residents. His nights were dedicated to completely overhauling his company's structure and values. A week after the project began, John finally mustered the courage to visit Mary in the hospital. He found Lily in the hallway, her face a mixture of conflicting emotions. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice trembling, "Mom is resting now." John nodded, feeling the weight of the silence between them. "Lily, I'm so sorry. More than I can express." The girl studied him for a long moment. "You're really trying to fix things, aren't you?" "With all my heart," John replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I know it may never be enough, but I'll do everything I can to try to right my wrongs." Lily hesitated before speaking again. "Mom is getting better. The doctors say the new treatment is working." Relief washed over John. "That's wonderful, Lily. Can I see her?" At that moment, the door to the room opened, revealing Mary. She looked stronger, though her eyes still carried the weight of the recent betrayal. "John," she said simply, "Come in." The conversation that followed was difficult, charged with raw emotions. Mary expressed her anger, her disappointment, but also her confusion at John's genuine efforts to repair the damage. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Mary said finally, "but I recognize that you're trying to do the right thing now." John nodded, accepting her words. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Mary. Just the chance to try to fix what I broke. For you, for Lily, for all of Hollybrook." As he left the hospital, John felt exhausted, but with a small thread of hope. The road to redemption would be long and difficult, but he was committed to seeing it through. In the weeks that followed, Thompson Enterprises underwent a radical transformation. John implemented strict environmental responsibility policies, established an independent ethics board, and redirected a significant portion of the company's profits to social and environmental causes. In Hollybrook, the results of the cleanup efforts were starting to show. The air seemed cleaner, the water clearer. The compensation fund was helping families pay for medical treatments and recover lost businesses. Slowly, the community began to heal. Mary, now well on her way to recovery, observed the changes with caution, but also with growing hope. Lily, in her childlike wisdom, seemed to be the bridge between the painful past and a potentially brighter future. One afternoon, as John supervised the planting of new trees in the town park, Lily appeared beside him. "Mr. Thompson," she said, offering him a small wildflower. Thank you for not giving up on us." John accepted the flower, tears welling up in his eyes. In that simple gesture, he saw a glimpse of redemption, a possibility that through hard work and genuine dedication, even the gravest mistakes could be, if not erased, at least mitigated. And so, under the blue Vermont sky, John Thompson continued his path of redemption, one step at a time, one life at a time, determined to transform his legacy of destruction into one of hope and renewal. The church bell in Hollybrook pealed joyfully, announcing Christmas Eve. The town square, once a silent symbol of the town's struggle, now glowed with colorful lights and the cheerful chatter of residents. A year had passed since John Thompson's shocking revelation, and the town, like its inhabitants, had undergone a remarkable transformation. Mary Evans, with a radiant smile and cheeks flushed with health, adjusted the final details of the large community Christmas tree. Her hair, once dull and thin due to illness, now shone with vitality. Beside her, Lily, now 11 years old, hung handmade ornaments, her eyes sparkling with the excitement of the holiday season. "Mom, look!" Lily exclaimed, holding up a butterfly-shaped ornament. "Remember when we made this last year, in the hospital?" Mary hugged her daughter, recalling those difficult days with a mixture of emotions. "Yes, darling, and look at us now." Indeed, Mary's transformation went beyond physical health. In recent months, she had become a prominent voice in the community, leading environmental awareness initiatives and working closely with the recovery teams. Her personal experience had transformed her into a passionate activist, determined to ensure that no other family went through what hers had. Across the square, John Thompson watched the scene with a mixture of admiration and humility. He was a different man from the impeccably dressed executive who had arrived in Hollybrook a year ago. His clothes were more casual, his face more serene, though marked by the lines of worry and hard work from the past year. "Mr. Thompson, Mrs." Peterson's cheerful voice broke through his thoughts. "Don't just stand there. Come help us with the garlands." John smiled, joining the group of residents decorating the lampposts in the square. As he worked, he reflected on the year that had passed. It had been a journey of ups and downs, of resistance, and slowly, of acceptance. The first few months after his confession were the most difficult. Many residents avoided him. Some even confronted him openly. But John persisted. Day after day, he showed up to work on the recovery projects, listen to the community's concerns, and implement real changes. Thompson Enterprises had undergone a revolution. It was now recognized as a leader in ethical and sustainable business practices. John had stepped down as CEO to focus entirely on the Hollybrook project and similar initiatives in other affected communities. Gradually, distrust gave way to curiosity, and then to cautious acceptance. John wasn't seeking forgiveness, but the chance to make a difference, and that more than any words, began to touch the hearts of the residents. Lily approached John, offering him a cup of hot chocolate. "The decorations look beautiful, don't they, Mr. Thompson?" John accepted the drink with a gentle smile. "They're wonderful, Lily. You all did an amazing job." The girl hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "You know, at first I was very angry with you, but now I understand that people can change, they can do better." Lily's simple but profound words struck John like a ray of light. He knelt down to meet her eyes. "Thank you, Lily. Your wisdom and your open heart inspire me every day to be a better person." As the evening progressed, more and more residents gathered in the square. Mr. Jones, once one of John's harshest critics, now chatted animatedly about plans for a new community garden. David Don, the mayor, is prepared to give a speech. "So, my dear friends," David began, his voice echoing through the quiet square. "A year ago, our community faced one of its greatest challenges. We were hurt, angry, and afraid. But today, look around. I see a Hollybrook that is stronger, more united, and more aware than ever before." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. David continued, "We have learned that even from the gravest mistakes can come opportunities for growth and change. Thanks to the tireless efforts of all of you, and yes, also of John Thompson, our town has not only recovered, but flourished." John lowered his head, feeling the weight of David's words. Mary, noticing his discomfort, quietly approached and placed a hand on his shoulder, a simple but deeply meaningful gesture of acceptance. When David finished his speech, the large Christmas tree was lit, bathing the square in a warm and welcoming light. The children shrieked with delight, and even the adults couldn't contain their smiles of wonder. As the celebration continued, with music, dancing, and plenty of homemade food, John found himself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past year. He had arrived in Hollybrook seeking personal redemption, but he had found so much more. A purpose, a community, and in a way, a family. Watching Mary and Lily dancing joyfully with the other residents, John felt a wave of gratitude. He knew that the road ahead would still be challenging. There was much work to be done, not just in Hollybrook, but in all communities affected by irresponsible corporate actions. But that night, under the bright stars and surrounded by the warmth of the community, John Thompson felt something he hadn't experienced since his childhood. Hope. Hope for a better future, for deeper and more meaningful relationships, for a life dedicated not only to personal success, but to the well-being of all. As midnight approached, Mary joined John, offering him a glass of champagne. "To new beginnings," she said softly. John raised his glass, meeting Mary's eyes. "To second chances and open hearts," he replied. And as the church bells chimed, announcing Christmas Day, Hollybrook celebrated not only the birth of Christ, but also the rebirth of a community that had learned the power of forgiveness, the strength of unity, and the beauty of a new beginning. Lily, watching her mother and John talking amicably, smiled to herself. Her letter to Santa, written so long ago in desperation, had brought so much more than she could ever have imagined. Not just her mother's healing, but the healing of an entire town. And so, under the starry sky of Hollybrook, a new story began to be written. A story of redemption, of love, and of everlasting hope. A story that proved that sometimes Christmas miracles come in the most unexpected forms, bringing light even to the darkest of times.